This could be one of the most important weeks at the UN in our lifetimes. On Friday, Palestinian Authority Prime Minister Abbas officially asked for statehood at the UN. Now, the U.S. is promising to vote no and, if necessary, veto it. And everyone worries what could happen next. Former U.S. Ambassador to the UN, John Bolton, joins us. Good evening, sir.
Glad to be here.
All right, let me jump ahead a little bit. Let's assume that that there is a vote and the United States eventually has to veto it in the UN Security Council. What happens next?
Well, that ends the prospect for a Palestinian membership in the UN. There are various other procedural alternatives. The most likely thing that they will do is seek to have the UN General Assembly, where we don't have a veto, either declare Palestine to be a state or declare Palestine no longer to be an observer organization at the UN, but to be an observer state. Both of those alternatives in an effort to make believe that Palestine has become a state.
All right, but what happens then in Israel? Now let's say that we're at that situation and everyone in that region is now absolutely deeply distressed.
Well, if I were Israel and or the United States, I wouldn't pay any attention to a General Assembly resolution. Look, the General Assembly could vote this week to make Disneyland a state, and it wouldn't have any more impact outside of the General Assembly Hall for Palestine or Disneyland. The General Assembly does not have authority to make these decisions. This is a purely theatrical gesture, and people ought to treat it that way.
Is it likely, though, to escalate violence? I guess I think that's what many people fear.
Well, the Palestinians, in a way, the Palestinian leadership, I should say, in a way, are making a threat here that either you give us what we want or our people will go into the streets. My response to that is that's not a way to deal. This is an effort to create facts on the ground in the Middle East by wandering the corridors of the United Nations. It's a fantasy effort, and it ought to be treated that way. And honestly, the United States could have stopped this a long time ago. I put a lot of blame here on the Obama administration's incompetent diplomacy. Well, the Obama administration is doing everything it can right now, including Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, to try to make sure that this vote doesn't happen. No, they're not. Well, no, they're not. All right. Well, what do you say they are not doing? I would do what we did in the first Bush administration in 1989, when the PLO did exactly the same thing that the Palestinians are trying to do now. And I would tell the other 190-plus members of the United Nations, if you vote for a declaration of Palestinian statehood, the United States will defund the United Nations. Period. Close quote. And if that happens, then what do you predict is sort of the natural sequence of events to follow? Exactly what happened in 1989 when the PLO tried to get into the World Health Organization. It stopped their effort dead in its tracks, and it stopped it for 20 years after that. I think it would work here. If the Obama administration had made this point 6 months, 9 months, a year ago, we wouldn't be here today. Now, Prime Minister Netanyahu is coming here to the United States as well. What do you expect that will be the way he will address this or handle this when he's here? Well, I think the Israelis would just as soon not have a vote on the subject, and what they've been trying to do is work to see if they can prevent the PLO from even getting a majority in the Security Council, which is 9 votes under the UN Charter, 9 out of 15. If the Palestinians get less than 9 votes, then a U.S. no vote is technically not a veto because we're not blocking a majority. I think, though, that what the Europeans are trying to do, and what the Obama administration tried to do before the last few weeks, is get the Israelis to make concessions to get the PLO to back off. I think that would be a big mistake. All right. Now, I've characterized this as a very momentous week. The way I hear from you, you don't think it's quite as momentous. It's momentous only if you believe what happens in the General Assembly affects the real world. I think we ought to make it very clear. I don't think that. I'm thinking of sort of the impact back in Israel when the Palestinians come away without being a state, and they're very angry and looking for a reason to fight. That's what my attention's on. Look, if it takes a failure at the United Nations to get them to go into the streets, they need to find other work to do. This is purely political. Even Hamas, I mean, this may be the only time in my life I've agreed with Hamas, has said this is an effort without any content to it, and it's exactly right. Ambassador, thank you, sir. Thank you.